time for us to talk about new mobility. What is it and why is it important for us to know about it? What can it do for us and what can we do to make it happen? Now I would like to call on our project manager for this particular project. Her areas of specialization include sustainable transport planning, regional and urban planning, regional cooperation and infrastructure development, sociology, planning and policy sciences, as well as project development and monitoring and evaluation. So as you can see, she's a perfect fit for the project. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Dr. Marie Danielle Guillen.
Good morning. As you can see, this is an introduction to our project, and we call it Catalyzing New Mobility in Cities. Actually, we're being supported by the Rockefeller Foundation, and I'm titling it as Finding NeMo in Manila, in Metro Manila. So I'd like to make it, I think, Dika tried to introduce me, so I want to make it a bit more personal, because I feel that in order for you to be really part of this project, we should feel it by ourselves, right? So first, what is new mobility? So let me start with our background and purpose. So the search focuses on the use of new mobility as a lens in search of more sustainable and innovative solutions in the urban public transport system in Metro Manila, in particular ensuring that the needs of the poor and the vulnerable sector are met. So what do we really mean by mobility? I am just wondering how many of you how did you come here to Ateneo? Train? Thank you. And how about the others? Car? What kind? Private or public? I mean, taxi is still part of your public transport, right? So how many came by taxi? Cab? Okay, good. How about private? Private vehicle? Well, don't worry, that's not a problem. It's just that I want to introduce you, what we mean by mobility. So with that, let me start with our basic concept. So what do we mean by mobility first? We're talking about new mobility, but what do we really mean by mobility? So basically, it's both the ability of a person, including that goods or that the community needs, and to travel to destinations of choice, and the amount of movement and time necessary to do so. So that's what you can read in literature. Then we go to transportation, right? So transportation is actually the movement of people, animals, goods from one location to another. But the field is actually divided into three parts. We call it infrastructure, vehicle, and operation. Sorry. Can you just fix? No, what's happening? Okay. So, can you see in the picture? Yeah, I want you to engage because that's the idea of catalyzing new mobility. We want to make more catalysts of this change. So, what can you observe? What can you see with the picture? What can you say with the picture? Yeah, thank you. And the other one is more about cars. So this is common, right? So what then is new mobility? When we talk about new mobility. So actually, new mobility is this initiative towards a multidisciplinary, multi-sector, top-bottom up approaches like social enterprise, innovation to mobility, addressing a socially inclusive transport sector. So we're talking about our transportation. And what we mean by multidisciplinary is that all of us are actually a part here in transportation. Just like an insight, 10 years ago actually, I did my urban planning in the University School of Urban and Regional Planning. And my thesis, and my friend and I met a Japanese. And this Japanese friend of ours, like was saying, Daniel, I really don't understand you guys here in Metro Manila. Why don't you cycle? And that struck us. So my friend took that as, okay, maybe we'll have a thesis on that. So he actually wrote a thesis on attitudes of cycling. And then I did on the study on helicopters for our animal first transportation. So that was 10 years ago. And what's really interesting with that study is that that actually led to, especially the attitudes in cycling, is that the University of the Philippines, I think, used that study for the creation of our car-free oval in Diliman. But that took, I think, 7 years or 6 that I can see here from the University of the Philippines National Center for Transportation Studies, who was actually a colleague in Japan, because many of us studied transportation, came from Japan, and were familiar with the infrastructure and all this thing. But maybe that's something that actually is missing, is that we're not really looking on the people using it. So maybe this is a fresh, well, it's because as transport planner, we're really looking at improving the transport system, right? But normally, the first thing is that you fix the traffic, which is really disappointing because that's the thing that I also noticed in Japan. I mean, having been there for like 8 years, and I think I was fortunate to be in a city that is actually a car-based city. When I went there, my professor asked me to buy a car. So it was just so strange, right? But then, at that time, I don't know if that was also the reason that he extended me, because he told me that, yeah, eventually you will shift to public transport, but that would take time. And then he let me try driving in Tokyo, and people think that maybe they have a good public transport system, good road system for cars, right? And I experienced traffic there, really terrible traffic. But when you complain to the people and they say, yeah, but you always have an option. So I think driving and using public transport, there's always the need for an option. These people don't complain because they have a good option. But still, the traffic in Tokyo is terrible, but they don't complain. Why? Because they can always see this good public transport system. So what we want to say is that this new mobility will try to incorporate the dimensions of sustainability in transportation, such as what we call social equity, economic, financial, health, ecology, physical environment, air quality, noise, and of course climate change, which is actually one of Ateneo School we have been Tony here as our climate change negotiator, so you can link it to the transport. And this is actually based on the premise that as complexity increases, the notion that a single solution to solve transportation challenges decreases. So there's actually a need for all of us to be engaged in this call for new mobility. And what we say about, I think it's not fair to say that our government is not working, because they're really trying to do this change. But also what we call from the bottom up is that we will all need some catalysts, and maybe try to also, as a business sector, try to find ways on how we could really solve this kind of issue. So when I'm talking about the multidisciplinary approach, it's because that an engineer may envision solutions that include infrastructure and fuel, but may not link them enough to urban design, policy, and commuter behavior. An urban planner, which is many of us, may develop groundbreaking approach to land use and urban design without really paying much attention to new services like car sharing, bike sharing, mobility management. And then an IT developer may come up with a unique system to share payment, journey planning, or traffic management, but may not spend time on thinking all these use of policies. But that's the thing. I think all of us trying to do something, but we're not really linking that together. I think what Susie once mentioned in our first urban planning, transport, and mobility seminar is that there's a need to connect the dots and see how all of us can really link together and see this kind of initiative to blossom. So what we want, I think, in the program is that to have this new platform, resource center, and enabler of innovation for purposes of governance, ensuring a socially inclusive mobility in the region. So we want to utilize and complement existing studies by initiating metro-wide conversation among stakeholders, which we know all of you here, and to introduce this new mobility and find out how stakeholders envision the future of transport system in Metro Manila. So we're not starting from scratch. We already have it. What we did is maybe to see that all of us can actually be that catalyst, that kind of change that we want to see in our system. And then, so what do we mean by finding NeMo in Metro Manila? So essentially, it means taking myriad steps that all lead to a paradigm shift. So we want, I think that's what innovation at the basic of pyramid. We want this kind of mind shift. And now we try to focus on people's needs and wants, especially that of the poor and the vulnerable group. It's interesting because part of our research, we have this research part of the study, and maybe we can also learn from what we call the urban poor and maybe the vulnerable groups, because that's what we also want to highlight. And then we want to see this evolution of transport as attention turned to energy efficient mobility models, shared transport scheme, and community-owned transport. So, NeMo Forum Series. So, we have what we call Let's Talk NeMo series, and we plan to start it after this launch. So, it's actually a venue for people to habitually meet to share information, ideas, insights, initiatives for taking action at the community level, and increase advocates of better mobility and access to transportation in Metro Manila, especially for ordinary Manileños and the poor and the vulnerable. So we actually started that, and we'd like also to thank Ayala for providing the venue. So we had the urban and public transport talk in last October, as soon as we had this program started, inception. And last week actually, we had some workshop with the community in Matunda Balara. So we did introduce the concept of new mobility, and I think Professor Dr. Doy mentioned about this, that they're scared. But you know what's really interesting is that this urban port group told us that actually we really don't mind the widening the road space. And I was like, really? We're just afraid that, you know, when they widen, we will be dislocated. And then we were explaining, you know, that's actually what we're trying with new mobility. The importance of road sharing for the people. Because you'll notice if you see these communities, really, maybe there's really a way of flipping things, especially before focusing on this kind of development too. So we want to highlight that in the part of our research. So we've got, as we mentioned, the goal is to sustain this conversation among the stakeholders about how citizens can be empowered to shape patterns of mobility and access in Metro Manila to be more inclusive. So the challenge is to promote non-motorized transport such as walking and biking, public transport, paratransit, buses, maybe BRTs and trains, and the elimination of unnecessary travel through the smart use of traditional and cyber communication. Again, what we want to highlight is actually our government is trying their best to improve the system. Maybe that's a reason there's this particular focus on the traffic. But what we want to highlight is maybe also that all of us need to try to shift that to this use of car sharing. I think we all know, especially if we're working for the industry or those working in companies, the first incentive is actually to get a car. Right? If you go up to the ladder, they will provide you with a car. And I was like talking to a friend of mine who's in the BPO industry. They were telling us that I really don't understand how to convince our higher ups in the US or I think in Europe, because they couldn't understand why we give cars as incentive. When in other countries they give transport incentive, public transport cards or these things. But how can we say that we don't have that here? So it's something also that, we're trying to look at even our BPO industry as part of this study. So as I mentioned, we've got researching NeMo in Metro Manila, and that through the research, the project will try to explore how the current public transport system affects the poor and the vulnerable population of Metro Manila, and we're trying to map this public transport system. And then understand the mobility patterns, costs, and issues of the poor and the vulnerable groups. It's important. Maybe, as I mentioned earlier, maybe we can also learn from them because at the end of the day, they might be the truly sustainable one, walking, doing the cycling, and those are the things that maybe we would like to show you at the start. But of course, aside from learning all about the issues, we want to seek new or emerging entrepreneurial or livelihood opportunities responsive to the mobility of the poor. So it's just that, you're all dependent to, okay, the government should give this, but we all know that we have a role to play, right? And then, of course, as I mentioned, maybe we have like this habitual group and not all of you could participate given that we have, of course, our business. We still want to engage the public on this, what we call engaging the general public for NeMo, which is mapping for inclusive mobility, meaning pinpointing transport hubs and terminals. So this activity aims to build a community of people wanting to create a platform or build an available platform to improve this information generated in maps for what we call a seamless multimodal connections that would benefit not only the poor groups or the vulnerable groups, but the general public. Actually, many of the thing is, usually the foreigners would say that we're actually transportation rich. You've got all these means, but somehow you really don't know how to connect them together. Like you've got the tricycle, you've got the pedicabs, you've got the jeepneys, you've got the FX, you've got the vans, and the buses. But this kind of connection is not really that, that's what we call seamless. You have to live in Metro Manila to know that, right? And maybe we have this tendency to, we maybe really don't have this mapping concept, right? Or the idea of maps. I think it's really difficult to find maps here anywhere. So we also have what we call the search for NeMo business models on social enterprise and social innovation awards. We want to surface enterprising solutions to solve mobility, social problems, and engage different stakeholders in solving pressing mobility problems of the megacities, especially the poor and vulnerable sector, and to document these existing social enterprises in the transport sector and perhaps generate more innovative ideas that would address our problem. And our team will present this one by one in a few minutes after this. So basically, with NeMo is that you need inquiries, and we will try to present that more information. We want to catalyze your interests and your insights, initiatives, innovations, and maybe see these interconnections. So with that, I'd like to end this introduction about the new mobility